Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Your Next Film. We took a break last week, but we are back.
We're
getting
back.
into the flow of things.
We're
We got a
supposed
fun
to be
episode for you
rested.
guys.
I don't know if that's true, but
I'm doing okay. I'm a little
I'm not.
rested.
I'm go on vacation and come back more burnt out somehow.
See, I was out of town the week before you were, so I recovered from that. Just crazy. I didn't even tell you how that went. Just a long week of safety training that had nothing to do with what my job actually is, but they make everyone do it. So now I know about the dangers of H2S and how to lock out, tag out a compressor, even though...
I love lockout, tag out.
Yeah.
Funny that they make you do it as well. I had that for my work, but it was all online. It's like, yeah, if you're like lifting heavy boxes in a warehouse, and I'm like, does not apply, but I know to use my legs.
It was a long week. I mean, every day the class time was like 9 hours. Like, that's more class time than like college was. It was a lot, but they fed us well. They had free beer at the hotel every single day. I mean, it was great. I had a whole hotel room to myself, obviously, and I played a lot of Balatro on my phone. Basically all I did.
I'll take it. I went to Ohio and drank more in 7 days than I had in the previous 6 months. So
Really?
there was also a lot of free beer involved.
Yeah.
You know how
Big
it is
drinking
in Ohio.
culture in Ohio? I don't know.
That whole like upper Midwest, you get lots of it's winter and therefore I'm going to go outside. No, I'm going to go perhaps outside for 2 minutes from the walk from my car to the bar.
Yeah, see, the thing is, like, it is pretty far up north compared to where we are, but cold is cold.
Yeah.
Like 20 degrees
sucks.
colder than, negative 20 versus 0 degrees. It's not a big difference. It's just
they
cold
also
is
have
cold.
snow, you have to remember, which was an experience for me.
I love snow.
It's always
As
odd seeing it come down like vertically. Like snow is always supposed to blow sideways into your eyes, but it was coming down like...
That's because you only see it in Oklahoma.
Yeah. I was like, that's not supposed to do that. This is weird. This is liminal.
Yeah.
But I had a good time in Ohio,
there.
actually. So maybe all the alcohol did me good. Well, this week we're talking about...
Why you should study the master filmmakers.
Master filmmakers, yes. Really, like, you've heard us say this before on this podcast, but it's like you learn about making movies by watching movies. It's sort of like you know how to become a good writer by reading a lot, which sometimes I feel like maybe my writing has suffered some in like the time since college where I've been too busy to read the books that I was reading before then. But to that, you really do learn a lot from just watching movies. Quentin Tarantino famously was like, my film school was working at a video store. And I don't disbelieve him. First of all, because everything he does is references to old movies that nobody's seen unless they work in a video store. But also because it's really the way to get good. The way to get good is watching other people who do things well. Watching their technique, picking up certain things. You don't have to crib everything from them. You don't have to do what I used to do with Wes Anderson films, which is basically try to recreate something shot for shot. But it is important to watch master craftsmen in the field and then pull some lessons from that. So This show, really laid back. It's going to be Zach and I talking movies. But the greater takeaway and theme of the show is just a few good films that you can learn from. So before we go into that, Zach, what inspired you this week?
What inspired me this week? Trying to think back. I always struggle with this question. I get inspired by a lot of things. Like, it's always random things, too. Like, the fact that I've got a deck of cards here, there's more combinations within a 52 deck of cards than there are, like, atoms in the universe.
You have been playing a lot of Balatro.
I've been playing Balatro. So this technically started on my work trip. I discovered a single-player card game that you can play. It's called Scoundrel. Technically a version of Solitaire, but it's really fun. And so I, bought a deck of cards, been just playing solo games, practicing some magic tricks, showing them to my wife. 50-50 chance she's impressed. But, I don't know. I get inspired by really random things, like this idea of infinity being contained, basically in this small form factor. Technically, there's more combinations of things just going on within, my smartphone. But something about, the deck of cards, it's so simple that you can kind of wrap your mind around it, and it's an impressive fact to me. So I've been thinking about stories that can lend itself to gambling, cards, chance, infinity. Those are the themes I'm playing with now. I also rewatched Kaiji. Have you heard of that?
I have not.
It's kind of the spiritual successor to Squid Games, but it's an anime. But Squid Games just completely ripped it off. And Kaiji came out decades ago.
Okay.
But it's just a really great anime about a character, really great character who has like everything that's great about like the tragic hero kind of archetype. You know, he has his flaws and you're kind of frustrated because he keeps making these bad decisions. It's largely a show about like him trying to gamble to clear his debts and get away from the mob. But he keeps making these mistakes and you're like, Kaiji, why are you doing this? But, you know, the story wouldn't happen if he didn't have those flaws and continue to like make more or less bad decisions. But I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about like certain themes, partially inspired by Kaiji and my just hours spent playing solitaire. I don't know what it is about it. It's really gripped me.
Well, just like many times I've been, hey, I've come on to this question. Mine is this week's watch with my film group, and this week we watched After Hours, the Martin Scorsese sort of a comedy, sort of just like the guy from American Werewolf in London just really having a bad time.
It's the same character or same actor?
No, it's the guy that like gets like attacked and killed in the beginning.
Okay.
Different guy, not the main guy.
I love that movie, by the way.
It's such a good movie. It's like a really weird, like in the Scorsese hierarchy, it's kind of a weird one because, you know, he's doing all these mob movies, he's doing all these like kind of zany, like crime-focused films for the most part, and then he just pops out like this great movie with like Cheech and Chong in it and Catherine O'Hara, the mom from Home Alone. Like all these like fantastic actors, just this one guy in New York City who meets a girl, goes over to her apartment, and then proceeds to have the worst night of his life as like just a bunch of random things keep happening, keep stopping him from going home. Great movie. Really, really good movie. And
I'll have to check that out.
Like, it's one of those things where I'm like, you made Goodfellas like right after this, you know? Like tonally, a lot of times you'll see a director just go through like kind of an ebb and flow where it's like, okay, this is a theme I want to tackle. I got divorced. I'm going to tackle a different theme. I got remarried. Time to stop writing about divorce. And you go right back up. But for Scorsese, it's just like this weird kind of interlude where he just pops in After Hours, and then goes on to like make like Last Temptation of Christ and Goodfellas and a lot of movies that are like much more on the general Italian man film trajectory that you would imagine him to be on. But it's a good one. I highly suggest it.
Yeah, well, you know, speaking of you should master or study the masters rather, Scorsese, he's one of them. If you haven't watched any Scorsese films, I'm speaking to myself. But you ought to.
No, you saw Killers of the Flower Moon with me.
Yes, yeah, I saw that.
I took you to see that one, so I know you've seen Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yeah, which was fantastic.
Well, do you want to get into it?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so for our first film, I'll let you, Zach, because I just spent a good amount of time warbling about After Hours. I'll let you talk about your first pick.
So, looking ahead in the script and seeing what you have for your first film, I'm going to mirror that. If you guys haven't seen 2001: A Space Odyssey, you've just got to see it. Because for me, 2001: A Space Odyssey, directed by Stanley Kubrick, which is going to be the director of the film Mateo's going to talk about next, too. My favorite director, by far. Every film he does, I think, is perfect. I mean, actually, I can see no flaws in his movies.
I was pretty young when I saw 2001 for the first time, and I was, like, still enraptured, still, you know, my parents brought me up, I hope, to appreciate art even if I didn't necessarily enjoy it. So for a lot of it, I was like, not my favorite movie, but I still saw its merits. I do find a lot of directors to be overhyped by the general sort of letterbox film bro types.
Yeah.
At the same time, there's not a lot of Kubrick misses.
Yeah, there's really not.
I can't name a Kubrick miss off the top of my head.
And his filmography, too, is so diverse. Like, every film feels completely different. Like, he doesn't do, I mean, you could say he does like genre films, but not in the same way that like Tarantino does, for example, you know, with The Hateful Eight being like an homage to the Western, right? At least in part. Every Stanley Kubrick film just feels like its own thing. And it's so crazy that he's like the number one guy that people point to as like the film auteur, because the fact that his style can permeate all these very diverse films is just a testament to how brilliant he is.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, look at just the impact he's had on the general artistic conversation, and just, frankly, just the way people interact with film in a lot of times. Like, look at, he does Doctor Strangelove, which Doctor Strangelove was sort of the movie that it
So
flipped the
good.
switch in my head on Kubrick, because before I was like, and I'm still not necessarily a fan of him as a personality, because I do feel a lot of people will crib unhealthy habits from him. He's an auteur. I respect that. I've been annoying about movies too before, but like a lot of people are like, well, Kubrick did it. And it's like, first of all, you're not Kubrick. Second of all,
Yeah,
there's a lot of
exactly.
myth that's built up around him that maybe he wasn't that exacting.
Yeah, a message to my past self.
But Kubrick himself, like, I watched Doctor Strangelove and I was like, yeah, it's one of those movies that you hear so much about and you're like, is it really that good? And then you watch it and you're like, it's more than just that good. It's amazing. Nothing about Doctor Strangelove is overhyped. And it has so many moments that have shaped the entirety of artistic culture and just pop culture. And that's
Yeah.
just one movie. Then we talk about, what he's done for Vietnam cinema with Full Metal Jacket. Just like soldiers singing the Mickey Mouse theme, everything with the boot camp, Arlie Ermey's entire career. He's like done so much, and that's not even mentioning The Shining in 2001, which are his biggest films.
Yeah. I will say, I think The Shining is probably his most overhyped film, in my honest opinion. It's still fantastic, but yeah, he just does something with characters. Like when you bring up Doctor Strangelove, I'm just thinking of the writing and like the dialogue of that movie and the performances. Oh, what's his name? The guy that plays 3 roles. We're a big fan of him. The actor, Peter Sellers.
Peter Sellers. Yeah.
Just between, with Peter Sellers being in Doctor Strangelove and his just kind of like over the top performance. I don't know. Kubrick just has a way of directing. Funny enough, like back to my thesis, my Kubrick thesis of, he manages to be an auteur with a style that permeates all these different genres, but every film is completely different. Space Odyssey doesn't really have like much in terms of writing and characters.
No, it's probably his most misunderstood film, and there are people that think Full Metal Jacket is about how cool war is.
How could you come away with that conclusion?
There's people that like everybody like loves the the Ride of the Valkyries scene in Apocalypse Now, and it's like this is like a travesty. You're seeing like women and children get blown up by rockets, and you're like, this movie is so about how war is so cool. Actually, the Heart of Darkness adaptation that this is. People just love to misinterpret war films. But
yeah,
that's
Heart of Darkness.
We've talked
is
about
good
it.
Too.
That's.
I will flex my my cinephile laurels a little bit, however you want to put that. I have seen Heart of Darkness, which I'm a little proud of. But yeah, I think everyone should watch 2001: A Space Odyssey. The reason why, and this is, if you've been following the show at all, you'll know this about me, is like I'm more of a visual director. I'm more interested in the parts of filmmaking that only filmmaking has. So, for example, literature has dialogue and characters and all this stuff that you can read about, but only film has that visual storytelling, the sequencing, the seeing things happen. And Space Odyssey it's a filmmaker's film. It's a I've called it like a pure film, the most pure film that I've ever seen. It's not to say that like it's necessarily the best film. I think it is, but it encapsulates like everything that like film that makes film unique from other storytelling mediums. It's very minimal. It's just visuals, sound design, and it just immerses you fully in an environment and like a pretty bare bones story. I don't know if I'm really hyping it up, actually. I don't know if that makes you want to watch it. But
you're talking about like the lessons you can learn from it, and I think it's a film that if he was a little to the left or a little to the right and didn't just nail it, it wouldn't work,
Yeah.
And every sequence in that film does what it needs to.
For sure. We talked recently, actually, about how important audio is in film. Like, Spielberg said audio is 70% of filmmaking.
Mm-hmm.
But the number one film that people watch with the audio off to study it is 2001: A Space Odyssey. The fact that you can turn the audio off of that film and just watch it and know exactly what's going on is just a testament to the filmmaking and specifically the cinematography and visual storytelling, the things that only filmmaking can do. It's just really impressive. I don't want to hype up the Space Odyssey as like I don't want to be pretentious here and be like, oh yeah, Space Odyssey is my favorite film. It is, but like don't feel like it's not approachable either.
Yeah.
It's not as like, it doesn't have to be pretentious. It's kind of just like whatever you want it to be.
It's not like Lawrence of Arabia where you're like, well, yeah, I'm sitting down for a film that is like very, very rich, overly rich even. It can be a tight film. I mean, it's a long film, but it's a tight film.
Yeah. So that's what I would say. I mean, learn from it, watch the compositions, watch how the visual storytelling is done, and watch how, when you do watch Space Odyssey, because I know you're going to right after this, just try to observe it and learn from the visual storytelling aspects of the film, and try to just see what you can find. I'm not going to tell you what to pull from it, but yeah, Space Odyssey is my first film.
All right.
So Mateo.
Well, I'm sure Zach saw Kubrick and his mind just blanked out and he went straight to 2001. Most of my picks are maybe movies that necessarily haven't been seen off of big directors, except for maybe the last one, which is from a director who's only done one film so far. So we'll talk about that in a bit. But this is another Kubrick. This is specifically one of his very first films. This is The Killing.
Arguably the best noir film.
We were just talking about how like Kubrick really like makes a tight film and all of that, and this might be his tightest. There's no fat on this movie. It is.
What, you mean the 2 minutes of like black screen and at the beginning of Space Odyssey isn't fat?
No, this is about a racetrack robbery. It's a straightforward noir film. A bunch of guys, a conspiracy, and everything that goes down as they try not to get caught and get the money out of the city. And it doesn't feel very Kubrick at first. Again, Zach was just saying there's no two films he's made that are like alike, and I would agree with that. But it doesn't really feel Kubrick at first, and then I would say about halfway through, I start to see that sardonic wit he has, and he sneaks it in. He's not too overly stylistic. Like people talk about Kubrick being such a visual director, and he is in this. This is a very visual film. The ending shot is so classically Kubrick. I love it so much. But he's much more subtle with it, and he just really devotes himself to making a tight noir that holds up. Like The Third Man holds up, but there's some parts of it that are definitely they've aged, and people don't engage with narrative films that way anymore. Not this. The Killing is fresh as a daisy. Big fan. What you can really learn from it is just, it's sort of like watching Brick, which is Brian Johnson's first feature, or watching.
So good.
It's so good. Or, watching early Shane Black scripts, where you see a film that is just so devoted to being a good film and being a tight film, and it's not too dedicated to style, to whatnot. And I love style. I love Wes Anderson. His films have always been about only style in many ways. That's reductive, but for the purpose of this analogy. But The Killing is just like, I'm here to tell a story really well, really tight, engaging characters, engaging plot, engaging visuals. And it's simple, but it's smooth, and I like that.
And I respect the focus of it too.
Yeah. If anything, Kubrick's always been a focused director.
Well, I guess it's my time to...
Yeah, your turn again.
Okay, so for my second film, I'm going to reluctantly talk about Eraserhead by David Lynch. Eraserhead was a film that you and I watched while we were doing research for Bleeding Heart Routine.
It was our black and white pact.
Yeah, so for like 2 months straight, we only watched black and white films. They also happen to be 4x3. Yeah, the films we watched together, which were the only films I was watching. And Eraserhead was one of them. And the thing I think David Lynch does so well is create this like really oppressive atmosphere. There's just nothing more oppressing really is the best word for it. Like, you watch Eraserhead and you just feel trapped in this world alongside this character. There's very few things. It's a miserable feeling. It's almost as miserable as Rabbids.
Yeah.
Rabbids is just miserable in a good way. I mean, that's kind of the point. But you watch it and you're just like I feel like I'm in this world and I'm just stuck here, and the atmosphere is just really dense.
He does that with Twin Peaks too, but in the opposite direction, where it's kind of this like whimsical, melodramatic world he's created. That's the atmosphere of Dale Cooper walks in to the restaurant and he toots on a little wooden like train whistle, and everybody's like, yeah, like this would happen. It's Twin Peaks. This is the atmosphere here. He's
It's
very
almost
good at,
it's
very good
oppressive
at
because of
creating a vibe.
yeah, in Twin Peaks, I haven't actually seen Twin Peaks, but I imagine it's oppressive, like you said, in the opposite direction, just because of how many possibilities there are. Like, it's not like Eraserhead where you feel like you're stuck in this environment. Twin Peaks, it's more like you feel trapped by potential in a way, because like anything could happen.
Well,
and that's
I won't spoil it for you, but it's a very specific atmosphere of pure whimsy. Yes, anything can happen, but also, well, I shan't spoil it. There is an oppressive nature in it,
I'll have to watch it.
But it's an undercurrent versus Eraserhead, which is very much top build.
For sure. Yeah, and with Eraserhead, I think what contributes to that atmosphere just feeling just so horrible and like depressing to be in is there's not much to really ground the environment in. Like, a lot of the shots have like a really bright key light. They only illuminate the subject and everything else just falls to black. The environments themselves aren't they're detailed, but they're not like, for example, the shots in Eraserhead where he's walking through just like this pipe yard. And you're like, I don't know where he is. I hear this like train in the background. Maybe I'm actually confusing that with Rabbits. Is there a train in the background in Eraserhead?
There's like whistles in Eraserhead, like the factory whistles.
Like heavy industry. Like, you don't know where you are. You don't know where this guy
is. You're in Philly, that's where you are.
You are, but the way that he films it and he just doesn't grant the audience the comfort of understanding fully the environment that they're in, at least in some of the shots. And so, yeah, I think that's a good takeaway. Just watch that film. If you want to build tension by not needing to really do anything at all, limit the information that the audience can really latch onto.
Well, for my second pick, Hail Caesar by the Coen brothers. This is a film that I think it was the last double Coen film. Joel and Ethan are no longer making films together because one of them decided they didn't want to make films anymore. I think it was Ethan that he was like, I've done it. I'm done. I made The Big Lebowski, whatever. So now it's just Joel, to my knowledge. I might have it. One of them quit. The other is still making movies that are sometimes not good because he's making them with his wife. So as a writer. And if she's watching this podcast, first of all, I'm sorry. Second of all, why? You're not our demographic. We're going for a much less established demographic. But regardless, Hail Caesar is one of my favorites still. It's about George Clooney and Josh Brolin. George Clooney being a movie star in the 1950s. Josh Brolin being sort of a producer who has to clean up all his star's messes. And Brolin's hunt for Clooney after he gets kidnapped by communists who hold him for ransom to send money to the USSR.
Very fun.
It's basically just like a bunch of stars. Every person is somebody that you know from multiple pieces of pop culture. You've got, obviously, Josh Brolin and George Clooney, but there's Scarlett Johansson, Jonah Hill, Channing Tatum is hysterical in it. A bunch of your General Coen regulars on top of that. It's a hoot. But I think it handles, in the way that many Coen Brothers movies do, that fine line between just kind of zany comedy and then, like, black comedy very well. Of course, there's the black comedy that's just the retelling of the Book of Job, so it's so bleak, but a serious man that they did, which is just Job in 1960s Florida. There's a fine line between black comedy and sort of just kind of wacky comedy, and they always manage to just really make it along that razor's edge. It's funny, somebody dies, you feel like you shouldn't be laughing, and yet it's hysterical. And I think really Hail Caesar's their sort of final huzzah. They spend a bunch of money on it, obviously. It's about 1950s Hollywood. It's a love letter to the that kind of golden era, silver era. And then they just lampoon everything about it. And I think that's the best. Within that, there's a scene where they have sort of like a Passion of the Christ, Ben-Hur, the Robe sort of like biblical epic, which was big at the time. And so they have, like, in the film, Josh Brolin sits down a bunch of Christian clergy and also a rabbi. And he's like, all right, like trying to like make sure that the film treats God and Jesus sympathetically and like they're not going to offend anybody from any denomination, or at least not the major ones. And as they do this, there's just this beautiful most Cohen like back and forth where the priests and the rabbi and the pastor are, and the Methodist minister and the Orthodox priest are all bantering back and forth about the nature of God and whether or not the Trinity exists or if God exists at all, etc., etc. And it's so beautifully done in a way that I feel many directors would just completely mishandle. And the character work is just on point, and they managed to do it while at the same time having this huge ensemble cast, which is hard to do. If I could do it in like my cast of like 5 characters, what the Coens do with 17, I would be thrilled. And I think just watching this, it's just a study in the way to do this kind of a plot with lots of webbing to it, but also a plot with lots of characters to it in a way that handles them and doesn't make them just 2D sort of facsimiles of people.
Which is impressive when you have so many characters to juggle.
Yeah, like, love him to death. And I feel like I've been ragging on Wes Anderson lately, which I don't mean to do.
Yeah, what's up with that, man?
He's my favorite.
We might have a little Wes Anderson-related surprise in next week's episode.
Yeah, or this week's episode. Who knows? Wait, are you bringing Wes Anderson on the show to just yell at me?
Bring him in!
But Wes Anderson does tend to favor characters who are a bit more 2D and easy to read, especially peripheral characters.
Yeah, there's a comfort to that, but you can only do so much.
Yeah, like, I mean, I don't mind it. Like when I'm watching Grand Budapest Hotel and there's just a guy who you can read him at like your first glance, and you're like, yeah, that's that dude. That's, he's obviously a butcher and he has specific views about his daughter's dating some, the protagonist or whatever. Like, that's great, and I love that. And I love the way that Wes Anderson kind of can make people into a picture book. But when I'm watching Hail Caesar and I'm seeing the way they're handling all these different, diverse people with interiority, I will say, like, I really enjoy the way the Coen brothers managed to take that same sort of Wes Anderson, look at him at a glance and get this person, and then make them into more, almost more fleshed out people. It's worth a watch. Go watch it.
Yeah, it sounds, I mean, you kind of sold me on it. I feel like a lot of the times religious themes can get just kind of weird. Like, you can go too far in one direction or too far in the other direction. For example, I was watching the Mandela Catalog, which is a famous series, analog horror series. Everyone's at least heard of it. I had never watched it, and I say I kind of like analog horror, but I felt like I at least needed to watch that, That's like saying you like noir films and you haven't seen The Killing, and go watch that. Or sci-fi films, and you haven't watched the most pivotal and influential sci-fi film of all time that everything draws from. But like, yeah, there's just some weird religious themes in the Mandela Catalog. And, it's not offensive to me by any means, but I'm just kind of like, just seems really shallow.
Did that need to be here?
Yeah, like, I don't know.
There's an angel in Twin Peaks, but it's Laura Palmer.
Oh, nice. I like that.
Well,
so for the last film, my last film, wait, no, not quite.
Not quite. This is film 2. No, we just did film 2. That was Eraserhead.
Pause. This is film 3.
Okay. Which is the last film.
For my third film, I'm going to give a shout out to The Lobster by Yorgos Lanthimos.
Yeah.
You can say that however you want. I actually don't know how to pronounce his name.
I believe Yorgos Lanthimos is the closest to proper that
we'll just go with it.
Usually hear. So,
but I am such a big fan. We talked about Hail Caesar as being like kind of a dark comedy. This is a dark comedy in a different kind of way, but it is a dark comedy. Yeah. It's bleak.
It's so bleak.
But it's kind of funny. Some of it's due to the writing, interesting scenarios. But what I want to point out is I'm a big fan of when I'm writing a story, I like to, and this has to do with world building a little bit too, but I like to create rules for the plot to like take place within. So I wrote a feature film script a few years ago, probably even longer than that.
Oh, is this the typewriter one?
Yeah, it was called Off Script. And I was heavily inspired by a lot of things. I don't think The Lobster was one of them, but similar to The Lobster, where it's this world where it's illegal to be single. Everyone has to be married. And this is like enforced from the top down. It creates this interesting rule that the plot can kind of play within and play around. And similarly, I wrote a script called Off Script, where, everything about society is scripted down to like the minute and the moment. And the plot kind of plays around that rule, which I really like. And I'm a big fan too of like Junji Ito short stories where there's sort of this like phenomenon, that's this mystery, this big like unexplainable thing that's happening, and the film, not the film so much, but the story kind of plays around that. So, for example, like in Uzumaki, it's about like this small town that's being like haunted by the spiral. It's like, well, that doesn't make sense. Like, what is this spiral thing? But the spiral manifests in a lot of very horrifying ways, and people become trapped in this town, and you see the progression of it. And have you read any Junji Ito short stories?
The funny thing, not at all.
Dude, I have to let you borrow it. I have a physical copy of Uzumaki.
I've seen it on your shelf, and I'm going, oh, Junji Ito. Yeah,
dude,
he does some cool stuff.
The visual, like, I need to just show you some images from this. It's like, you're like, holy crap, like, what am I looking at? This is wild. His illustrations are
this is
crazy.
The whole It Was Made for Me. I know that one.
Yeah, that one's good. Also creepy. But yeah, I like creating rules and then kind of like writing a story that kind of fits around those rules. I don't know, like from a writer's perspective, Mateo, how would you frame what I'm trying to get across? Would this be like a specific writing technique or a type of writing?
It's storytelling.
Yeah.
And the way he does it is really good.
But like Space Odyssey, for example, doesn't do that. It doesn't have like rules that it's like playing around. There's a specific thing.
I want to call it Kafka-esque, right? Because it's sort of like, the whole bit with Kafka is he turns into a beetle, and the horror isn't the fact that he turns into a beetle, but that he still has to go to work. It's this kind of surrealism that I really appreciate. The Lobster does it really well. If you want some of that, actually, funnily enough, a Kafka story, there's The Trial, which is directed by Orson Welles. It's got Anthony Perkins in it, where basically there's this guy, he wakes up, the cops like kick down his door and tell him, hey, you're under arrest, but nobody ever tells him what crime he's arrested for. He goes to the courthouse, there's all these random rules, he gets a lawyer, there's all these like random things, he keeps getting missteps, and they're like, we're gonna hold you in contempt of court, and he's like, I don't even know what's going on.
This sounds really good.
Red tape and bureaucracy, it's amazing. Orson Welles both directs it and is in it, but it has a lot of those same aspects of The Lobster, where it's like, why does anybody abide by this? But the horror is that you still have to live in this world and think your way around this world.
Right.
And if you don't, get married by a certain age, if you don't meet up with whatever woman and find your soulmate, they're going to turn you into an animal.
Yeah.
And in this case, a lobster. Right. But like, why are you going with it? Why aren't you living out in the woods and fleeing from this? And obviously, there's reasons for that, and it explains it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't.
And they're not
really
necessarily so good themselves either.
Yeah. It does it really well. I think it's just a surrealism regarding the rules following, but also it's very simple, as in it sets up the premise, in a world where X, people do Y, and then it follows through on that and then explores it further. And it just that exploration of a surreal concept is something
it's kind of where world building meets like plot. Yeah. Because they don't have to be like, you can just have a story that takes place in your backyard, and the world otherwise doesn't really interfere with the plot. But, in these cases, in the case of The Lobster, the world that the plot takes place within is inseparable from the plot. And so, yeah, give it a watch.
I think a lot of Joel Haver skits do this as well, where they set up this like really random premise. They have sort of people, usually there's one person who's like, this isn't normal, and then everybody else is like, what are you talking about? But it'll set up a premise, have people react to the parameters, and then middle to end of it, it starts to really explore the weirder aspects of it.
The boundaries of it.
Yeah, the boundaries. And that's what's really helpful. It's not so much, Christopher Nolan going like, yeah, I'm going to tell a movie forward and backward at the same time. It's Christopher Nolan playing with the way that he can do that, which lends you both Memento and technically Tenet, as he does it in different ways, and it plays with the boundaries of linear storytelling. And within plot, I think it's really helpful to go like, what if chickens were illegal, and then build a world around chickens being illegal, chicken dealer on the street corner, chicken grow houses underground. What happens if you're an agent who's in the chicken enforcement unit, and you have to raid this chicken farm only to see that your brother's the one raiding the chickens, and then you get home after letting him go without betraying your commitment to justice, and you find out that he's been sneaking chicken cutlets to your young child. No. Right? Play with that.
Yeah.
And obviously, I don't know if I would recommend doing it about chicken being illegal, but
no, do it, please.
do what you
Send it
want,
to me.
right? But like messing with all those premises allows you to really push your storytelling further than just what if there was a robbery, how would I get away with it?
Right. Well, that being said, what is your last film?
All right, my last film's a bit of an odd one because it's the first film Celine Song ever put out. But Celine Song is a notable playwright. She did, during the pandemic, one of my favorites, actually. This is where I really found out about her, was Chekhov's The Seagull, but done in The Sims 4, which was incredible, by the way.
Really?
I was like, like, oh, people are doing theater on Twitch. That's fun. I'm glad,
Yeah.
And then it's like, Chekhov's The Seagull, done in The Sims 4, hits me out of the blue. And, I thought that was really neat. I was like, she's done a bunch of other stuff. And then it turns out she put out a movie.
So in The Sims, is there like a way to do cinematography and like move the camera and get angles and
Yeah,
stuff?
you can move the camera. It's something that you really just have to experience.
You might need some mods for it, maybe.
You'll see. Go watch that. Past Lives is semi-autobiographical, a movie about basically this girl who emigrated first to Canada, then to the US from Korea, has to deal with a lot of that sort of third culture or, second culture, belonging to two worlds, relatable to me as, a dual citizen myself, but she deals with the immigrant lifestyle and a lot of the identity issues, having fallen in love with this boy now twice, and it never really works out. Then she, at a writer's residency, meets her husband, and then suddenly out of the blue, this guy comes back. Her like almost faded love from Korea. And like this actual premise sounds like it comes out of just like a rom-com, right? I'm married and I have a loving husband, but also there's this kind of like the tension of this like kind of dreamy man I was always fated to love, who now just kind of shows up back into my life. How will I handle that? Like that's every freaking Hallmark film, it seems like.
This kind of sounds like that movie, In the Mood for Love.
It's much closer to the tone of In the Mood for Love.
Okay.
It's not quite. I love In the Mood for Love. That's such a good film.
I actually
never
need to
watch
watch
it on Valentine's Day while being very single because that was a bad idea.
Well, we don't
on
have
my
to worry
part.
about that anymore.
Not anymore, but if you have perchance gone through a breakup and this is your first Valentine's single in like 5 years, like it was for me,
Yeah.
bad idea. Don't watch it. Watch it like the next day. Do not watch it on Valentine's Day. Past Lives is just so sophisticated. It treats the subject with such a three-dimensional exploration of how you actually deal with that sort of situation and emotions and feelings of identity and tying identity to romance. It's so good. And I think really just watching this to deconstruct how Song manages to make it so sophisticated is worth it. Just watching a movie that is, it's the script is ballet, right? Nothing in it is out of place. Nothing in it is tone deaf. Nothing in it is even, I would say, self-indulgent. The entire movie is a triumph, honestly. And I believe it was nominated for Oscars at least. And it fully deserved them because, oh my gosh, I cannot get rid of how affecting it is and how like devastating. I came out of the theater with my wife and we were just kind of walked in silence for a second and she's like, man, wow.
I love it. I love it when a movie does that.
It's not a perfect film in as much as like I feel like it's too early in Song's career to say this is her perfect film, but it is a film that this seems to be a recurring theme for this episode, but it's a film that just does it so well, so focused and so elegantly that it had to have a spot on the list amongst the masters. I put Song up next to Kubrick and the Coen brothers, but I think there's a lot to learn from it. I don't think there's any specific, like, look how they use, watch how they use the camera for this or watch how they write it. It's kind of, as a whole, this sort of symphony of plot and visuals, because the visuals are drop dead gorgeous and the acting is great. Yeah, I'm just gushing about it now, but it is a movie I can gush about. And I went into it with, decent expectations. It's an A24 film. It's from the director of Chekhov's The Seagull for The Sims 4. So, like, I had high expectations, but they were beyond met. I'm very excited for her next film, which appears to actually be a rom-com. So we'll see.
As opposed to just a romance?
Yeah, it's funnily enough. This is a Dakota Johnson, Pedro Pascal, and Chris Evans 24 film, where Dakota Johnson plays a matchmaker that has found the perfect true love for, hundreds of couples. And in the trailer just came out. And she's like, "It's your 9th wedding that you've caused. Congratulations." And she meets this stunning, charming Pedro Pascal. He is like, some billionaire, right? Millionaire, very suave and smooth. But at the same time, there's her sort of messy ex-boyfriend that she's always had a thing for, Chris Evans, who she also reconnects with at the same wedding. And yet, like, this also looks like a really touching romantic drama, so we'll see. I think this might be Song's calling card, depending how this movie comes out, which is premises you think should be kind of in a schlocky romance, rom-com, turning out to be like deeply emotionally affecting. But
Right.
Well, that was just 6 films that you should watch to understand the masters. This is very much an episode where we tell you to go do things, go watch things. We're not like breaking down, here's how Kubrick manages to make an axe to the chest look aesthetically pleasing. We're not talking about specific scenes in Coen Brothers movie, but all of these films, I think, have, I would say, a solid lesson to be learned to watch them. And, we can talk about it all we want, but really you just have to go and watch these and learn from them. Well, Zach, we've talked about movies. We've talked about learning about movies. Where are you at creatively right now? How are you doing?
This time of year is always hard. Like between, I'd say, December and like April,
the end of the financial quarter?
Yes, that I just feel like it's always a bad time to be creative. The summer's the best time to be creative.
Yeah, we're in the bad part of winter.
Yeah,
no
especially
pretty lights
right now.
Are up, and we're spending money on Valentine's. So,
but with that being said, I've kind of taken a break. Haven't been thinking too majorly about I say that. That's actually not true. I'm not working on anything, but I have some ideas. I have some things I'm working towards. Just playing around with some themes, trying to figure out some low budget films to make. I don't know. It'll be an interesting year. We finally finished Hypnagogia.
Yeah.
Finally.
It is, well, unless I have some insane notes, it's looking pretty good right now. So
yeah, I'll have to send it to you. It's not a frame past 40 minutes. It is literally 40,000. It is hilarious.
That's satisfying, actually.
It is. Now, I think I might be able to find a way to make it another 30 seconds, 20 seconds. So I might do that.
Well, I mean, we might need those reshoots.
Maybe.
We'll see.
I will put that ball in your court.
Oh, okay. Yeah, as producer, I've got to schedule them.
But if you feel like we really need them, we might not. But I'm happy with how that turned out. Obviously, my priority for the start of the year was finishing Hypnagogia. And I don't really know what I'm trying to do this year. Just don't know.
We did do a feature. Obviously, it's never good to rest on your laurels, to stagnate.
No, the S word.
It's never good to do that, but at the same time, it was an endeavor.
Right.
I will say, it did challenge us. It was taxing, both physically, mentally, and financially.
I will never financially recover from this film.
I sure hope I will, because I need to financially recover. But with these things, sometimes it's best to just set everything down for a minute, play around with some little things,
right,
and then come back to the big stuff in a second.
Yeah. Speaking of Hypnagogia, I ran into one of our actresses yesterday.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, I ran into Connie.
Cool.
Yeah, at the bike park. I was mountain biking.
Did you tell her, hey, we finished the movie?
No, I didn't talk about the film.
Oh,
we just talked about other stuff. But
that's good.
She was there with her boys, and they just up by Riversport, that boathouse district.
Yeah.
There were some they were working on something for a long time, but they finally finished it just in time for me to move 30 minutes north. But
30? You're more like 40, 45.
Yeah, maybe
you're
something.
47 from my house.
But dude, it's sick up there.
Yeah.
It's kind of sketchy. So it's been windy. I don't know if you've noticed that. We've had the red flag warnings and all that craziness. We went to mountain bike yesterday, 26-mile-an-hour winds. The new jumps that they have, because they have multiple jump lines everywhere around. It's finally finished this mountain biking part. It's super sick. These jumps are already really sketchy because they're made out of concrete, which is a weird material, because up in Bentonville, and I'm not complaining because they are very well made, but in Bentonville, it'll be like a steel ramp, kind of a super kicker, and then a huge dirt landing pad.
Yeah.
And I like that. That's nice. Or you just have dirt, and that's great too. But here it's concrete takeoff, concrete landing, and the takeoff and the landing are both like that. So the margin for error on the landing.
Don't
just not
die.
there. And I had my full face helmet on, but I don't know. I got the speed right. I rolled over it a couple times, jumped it a couple times, just a little. And I was like, all right, I'm going to send it. I did all the right things. I didn't try to send it first try. I'm being smart about this. Now I'm going to send it. So I go, get up to speed, stand up to the jump. Wind gust hits me. I get knocked off course, like in midair. I'm panicking. I'm like, oh my God, land on my back tire, angled left. I put my foot down, almost just lost it completely. I mean, these jumps are huge.
Yeah.
I did not crash, but my helmet was on pretty tight. And when I landed, it like choked me. So I was like feeling terrible. Wind knocked out of me. I was like, I am done.
Went home.
Basically. But Emily was there with me. It was fun. Fun for a different day that's less windy.
Yeah, when you're not going to get blown into the river.
Yeah, literally. Well, that would be really impressive. You'd have to blow across the street. It's possible.
Yeah.
It is Oklahoma.
We had 70 mile per hour gusts the other day.
Yeah. Dude, it was scary up here the other day.
It blew my neighbor over. He fell and he couldn't get up, hurt his leg.
That's awful.
Yeah, I was over there. Like fixing stuff in his house, and he was like, "Yeah, it blew me over, scraped my leg." I was like, "Dang."
Yeah, the fire stuff is just not fun.
No.
And a lot of people, yeah, not to get too sad, a lot of lost homes around here. Not super close to me, but somewhat, like 70
got
plus.
Close to my parents.
Yeah.
About a half mile, quarter mile.
Yeah.
Like really close.
That stuff is just like, it's freaky because it can just start anywhere basically. It doesn't take much. Yeah. I think the cold weather is supposed to suppress it a little bit. So it's really cold today. So I think that does help because it's partially temperature and humidity and winds and dryness, which has to do with humidity.
We're low humidity, high wind right now. So
yeah.
Well, creatively, I've been actually on the uptick.
Nice.
I was talking about how I'm in my output phase now. I did not start my feature script in the month of March. I still have time. I don't know if I'll start it. I feel like when I've started projects I've been really dedicated to in March, they've died for some reason. March is just never a good time to start it.
Yeah.
It's just continue.
Bad luck.
It's got to be bad luck. It's more like it's where the end of winter, things are kicking up, and then work gets crazy because we're getting towards the end of the financial quarter. It's more like what that is. But I'm like, do I want to start a project and then have to abandon it and then 3 years later finally finish it? Or do I want to wait till April and then totally write it then? But because of that, I've been focusing on smaller little projects that I think are having a good time with. So you'll see them. You guys will see them eventually. You know how it is with these little projects where it takes forever to work on, but I've put out multiple projects at the end. So what can you say?
What are they? Can you give me a sneak peek? Or a little, teaser?
Well, I'm shooting some of them on a handy cam, so...
Okay.
That's your teaser.
I think I know what you're talking about. At least for one of them.
Well, thank you all, listeners, for tuning in. Hopefully, there's a film you haven't seen in this little lineup that you should go watch. Or if you've seen everything we've talked about, which would be interesting considering the breadth of what we did talk about.
Yeah.
Good on you, and maybe go watch one of them that you haven't seen in a second. I saw Shutter Island last night again, and it was a Scorsese film I remember thinking was one of his misses. Didn't like it that much. But on watching it last night, it really holds up. It was much better than I remembered. And I came out of it with a changed view. So maybe you just need that little change view. Go watch The Killing again if you haven't.
Funny enough, that happened to me with Space Odyssey. I did not like it when I watched it for the first time.
Really?
Yeah, I hated it. I was
That's
like, this is
funny.
Yeah, I know. And then the second time I watched it, I don't know. And I guess partially it was that, but then I watched it again and understood it. It was like, oh, wait, this is actually the best film ever made, and I'm an idiot. Maybe not the best, but best in my opinion.
It's like in the AFI top 10 or top 15 or whatever.
It's got to be top 10. And just given how influential.
Let me check that. Hold on, AFI top 100.
Everything is a ripoff of Space Odyssey. Everything. Nicosia.
100 years, 100 movies. Let's see. It's not top 5.
Okay,
top
but top
5 are... And of course, this is let's see, what's the top 10? It is not top 10.
Dang.
Wait, this is their 100 years. Hold on.
Because
that was their no particular order.
Gotcha. Searched best movies of all time. and the Google results are all over the
got
place.
The Godfather, Shawshank Redemption, Schindler's List is up there. Raging Bull. That is
The
a
Dark Knight,
controversial one. I would not put
the
Raging
IMDb
Bull.
top 250 movies. Number 3 is The Dark Knight, which I feel like is very high. 12 Angry Men is number 5.
People keep putting Citizen
movie.
Kane up there. I just got Oh
Yeah.
Brother, Where Art Thou in the top, like it's like number 8.
That seems, okay, very good movie. Seems very high.
Somebody listed Lord of the Rings Return of the King as the number one best movie.
On IMDb, within the top 12, there are 3 Lord of the Rings movies, which is excessive. I don't know if I agree with this.
I mean, I love the Lord of the Rings movies. They are a triumph of cinema.
Yeah.
They definitely deserve at least one of them, or just as, caveat, the trilogy. It's all kind of one movie. They do deserve a spot up there, but also it's kind of a Reddit moment, I'll be honest. Like, there are better films.
Like Parasite, remember that Korean film
Yeah.
from 2019? Number 34.
What?
Really good
Ridiculous.
movie.
Yeah,
really good movie. But like Psycho is number 35. So I don't know. IMDb.
All right, this
A lot of
needs
these
to
I
be an
do agree with.
episode. We rank our top 10 movies of all time, unbiased. If you
Our
disagree
top 10?
with us, we're going to kill you.
I don't know about that. That's funny.
We're
Apocalypse
engaging
Now
with
is
the
55.
audience.
Dude, Apocalypse Now, I would say is better than Lord of the Rings. And that's 55.
Yeah,
You know what I'm
Apocalypse Now
saying?
is better than Lord of the... I would agree with that.
Bro, okay. I haven't seen Dune, but Dune Part 2 is number 56. And Memento is 58. This list is crazy.
Yeah, it's so hard to do this.
It is.
But what you really should do is watch a bunch of these movies, because they're all from the masters. So
They are.
there you go.
And maybe watch our film when it releases on...
Whenever it releases. Are you going to put a motion graphic right there with lots of sparkles?
Yes, sparkles everywhere.
Well,
When do you want to... Well, we'll wrap up the episode.
this has been your next film.
I've been your host, Zachary Koch.
And I've been your host, Mateo Guthrie. We hope this inspired you to go watch a movie.
Go watch a movie, then make a movie. Then watch another movie, then make another movie.
That's the pattern. You can only
This has been
you have
your
to
next
make
film.
you
Go
have to
watch
make
a
a
movie.
movie for every movie you watched.
Ooh, Joel Haver could.
Oh, Joel Haver could make movies. That man's insane. Have a good week. See you next week.